Thank you guys so much for being here. We're going to talk about something that's really near and dear to me. We're going to talk about my experiences here and how we're all evolving as people and some of the changes that can be somewhat uncomfortable and then also really fun. So, when I looked at my friend who was getting married recently, I was kind of overcome, not just because she looked beautiful on her wedding day, but because she really looked triumphant. She was so pleased with herself. And she had good reason to be. She'd made a deal that very few of our friends had been able to make. She made a deal with her family. She made a deal with her husband-to-be, and she made a deal with his family so that she could negotiate some time on her own before she got married. Okay, this time on her own did come at a price. She had a litany of compromises that she needed to make in order to get that time. She needed to show up every night for dinner, to have dinner with her parents. She needed to have showers at her parents' house because her parents were afraid that she was going to burn down her new apartment building. She needed to still meet with the parents-in-law to make sure that the house was ready and that everything was still on track for the wedding. But nonetheless, she had this bachelor pad to herself. She was having a great time. She felt like she had something that was her own. So when I looked at her at this wedding ceremony, I thought about this momentous occasion in her life that she'd been able to negotiate living on her own, something that very few people were able to consider. She'd been able to negotiate, which is something that's so unusual and so hard for so many of us. And it reminded me of my own experiences. For me, living on my own and getting married were separate events. They didn't have anything to do with each other, and they certainly didn't have anything to do with my mom. When I got married, when I was 32 years old, it was really of my own volition. I decided that I wanted to get married. I'd moved out on my own 2 days after graduation. So when I was 18 years old, I just said, you know what? I want to be on my own, and I did that. I didn't have to think about anyone else. When I came to China in 2006, I really thought about what a gift it was here to be here. By trade, I'm a marketer, and specifically, I'm a consumer insight specialist. So what that means is that I think about people all the time. I'm pretty nosy. I like to know what makes people tick, and I like to know what's important to them. So when I see these shifts, it's important for me to document them. Brands pay me to help understand what these changes are going to mean for them. They pay me and my mainland research team to help understand how they're going to be able to create a relationship. When I wrote my book last year, I was thinking a lot about how can I describe these changes? How can I really understand, number one, what makes Chinese consumers unique? And number two, how can I help people see a way forward? It caused me to be really serious about specifically what's going on. And I think that all of us know the basics. When you think about modern China, you can't help but pause at the fact that the one-child policy has really defined a lot of what culture looks like, what modern Chineseness looks like today. When you think about how people went from 3, 4, 5, 6 kids to just one solitary heir, it's obviously a big change. And in the US, a lot of that, for us, is kind of taken for granted. Of course you have a relationship with your parents. Of course you have a relationship with your spouse. But you have a relationship first and foremost with yourself. In China, it's not just about having a relationship with yourself. It's also, for these young Chinese, it's about creating a relationship with brands. It's about understanding, for these young consumers, brand hierarchies. So unlike consumers in the West, they don't have some of the same preconceived notions. They don't have some of the same ideas about what my grandparents drove, what my mother liked to wear. They don't have the same history with brands. So young people in China are really at work inventing new meaning for brands and really helping to concoct a new hierarchy of values. And if these values look like things that we're familiar with before, that's kind of expected. But the fact is that a lot of times they don't. They look new and they look kind of exciting. The difference with these young consumer pioneers is that they're not just thinking about how do we deal with consumption, they're also really thinking about how do we tackle ideas related to this gender imbalance. So the gender imbalance in China is very significant, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this. This one-child policy has really forced people to decide, I can have one child, I'm really going to favor having a son. And the pickle that that's left us in today is that there's 40 million quote-unquote bare branches, dudes running around trying to find a wife, that are not going to be successful. 80 million would-be grandparents hanging out at the park, not able to worry about if a child is wearing enough clothes, not able to pick them up from school, not able to participate in that social economy of that time. So when I look at ads in China, because that's a lot of what I do, I think about, how does marketing and how are they meeting? So last year when I saw this ad in my predominantly local building, I thought, this is amazing. This ad, which may just seem like a woman who's driving a car, was the first time that I had seen an ad that didn't have a man, that didn't have parents, that didn't have a child. This woman was making choices on her own, and she's obviously so proud of herself. She's at the pinnacle of life, and she's surprisingly alone. So if I compare that ad to ads that I grew up with, living with a single mother who was a feminist in the 70s and 80s in the US, what I see is a very different story. Now, these are some of my favorite ads. Angeli, does everybody remember this? I can bring it home in a bake, what was it? Somebody sing it for me. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan. Hello, we still remember it. Never, never let you forget you're a man. This woman had it all, okay? And the woman to the right of her, she's Wonder Woman. She's smoking. She's superior to men. She is the be-all woman. So when you look at these ads, you see that these women had their own breed of feminism, but it really was partially as a rejection for other things. It was saying, I don't need a man. I can do it all on my own. And that's a pretty big shift, because in China, you don't really have the opportunity to do things on your own. The iron fist. You had better get married. I want to see some grandchildren. So really, in China, it's about this stress. All of these people, these 40 million guys, these 80 million would-be grandparents are feeling, I made a deal, okay? I made a deal that I was going to have this one child. I was going to, give them all of the access and expectation going forward. And they were going to produce a child for me so that I could go to the park, so that I could hang out with my friends. And the reality is that that's not possible for a lot of people. We can't have that happen for a lot of people. So when I look at ads now, I see a lot of marketing and a lot of messaging that's doing things that's never been done in China before. This is an ad for a beauty cream. This beauty mask, for the first time, isn't talking about ingredients. It's not talking about benefits. It's talking about a woman having time on her own. And having that time on her own is a prized experience. Now, if you've ever been to a spa in China, I think most of you will know that there's very little actual prizing of solitude in that experience. This is very social, very jabby, 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 jabby. So to think about a beauty ritual as being a solitary and beautiful experience is really new. This is another ad. Now these 3 girls are having a chat. And the girl with the watch is saying, "Look, I got this from my sugar daddy. It's a beautiful luxury watch." And the other girl is saying, "I got this new phone, and it is so fancy. And what do you have?" And then here's the girl over here with the little saucy bob, and she's saying, "I have crackers, and I bought them myself." And you can feel in this moment, in this ad, that there is a piece of this girl who is standing out. Another value that has been really not discussed is, what does it look like if you're standing out? What does it look like if you're prizing being alone? And what does it look like if you're celebrating endings? This is an example of a divorce ceremony. We're not having one later. And this divorce ceremony is really largely a concoction of the 80s generation. That's the people that were born from 1980 through 1989. And in this ceremony, they're not only celebrating, okay, we were married, we loved each other, we had this moment, but they're also saying, you know what, it's okay if we get divorced. We can celebrate that we are going to continue our promise to always be happy. It's about instant gratification. It's about, if things don't work, you can do over. You can try again. So when we, in my company, talk to people, talk to consumers about what are they imagining in the future, a lot of times we ask them to create a vision board, which is an image, a collage of different things that they want in their lives at different stages. So when we ask these young women to think about, what is marriage going to look like? What is their life as mothers going to look like? We notice that those ideas are shifting. We notice that they're making space for themselves, and they're making space for a new kind of motherhood, a new kind of wife. So as I think about my friend, and I really celebrate the moment that she had on her own, and I celebrate the next phase of her life where she'll become a wife and a mother, I recognize that it's not just her vision board that needs to be adjusted. Her gap also creates a revision for the vision board of her husband, her parents, and her in-laws. I think that's the next evolution of feminism and women's movements in China, is not like the kind of feminism philosophies that my mother and I espoused, where we were able to separate ourselves from men and separate ourselves from family and just do what we wanted to do. This breed of next evolution of women's movements in China is really about how can everyone navigate a new space, a new way of relating, and a new way of being alone. Thank you.